explored the difference between an app and a website, we can spend some time on how to build it and design it. One of the most important steps of bringing something into reality is exploring other things that do the same thing. The reason why I'm talking about Instagram and we're not doing some original idea is because it's real. It's something that you're used to and familiar with. Now, when I say building a product, building a digital product, there's a lot of things that come to mind. Let's start with the first one. I am a product developer in my everyday life. I take requirements from a leader, from a designer, from a stakeholder or client, and I need to translate those requirements into something real. That might be as extensive as a feature or making an app do something it's never done before, or as perceivably simple as changing copy, changing text inside of a website. And to be honest, most of the things that I do from day to day are perceivably simple. They're smaller tasks that add a lot of value that everyone along every leadership level buys into, signs off, and then has me do. Whether or not this process is formalized isn't really the big deal here. The point is this is a jumping off point. Now that you know the difference between an app and a website, for me to drive the conversation of, okay, now let's build it. And at every step of let's build it, I can break down what those things mean. So when I'm handed something, we need to look at and start to break it down into meaningful containers of work. I call these to-do lists. You might have experienced in other job project management apps. The point is it's something that externalizes this work. That way it's not just in my head, it's not just in everyone else's head, it's something that we all agree on and can openly communicate about. That's one of the most profound things in the product development world, is that the open collaboration of what we create. I've explored in previous videos what Git and GitHub allow us to do, but there's something more behind those things. Meaning when I'm handed a piece of requirement and I need to make it real, I have to first investigate how it exists right now. I have to first research what exists right now before I can even leverage the skills and experience that I have. I need to know the delta, the gap between what exists right now and what needs to exist. So let's do that. We're going to run with this metaphor, this idea that we're building a photo sharing app that's just like Instagram, but it doesn't exist right now. And I'm going to take you through how to do that as a product developer and designer. So here we have the Instagram UI. First off, what is a UI? UI stands for user interface. It means we're coming up with design patterns and metaphors for how people should use and interact with an application. It's an insanely in-depth skill. That's the best way I feel like I can encapsulate what UI means. It is an insanely in-depth skill that we'll learn a lot more looking through Instagram. So if we're tasked with to make this real, I am a firm believer in starting with the containers and working our way into the details, because these are the things that will hold those details, because the containers are the things that we need to build first. They're the things that we'll have to consider with designs first in order to place the details. That's a common mistake, to focus on the details first when the larger things aren't done yet. So what are the containers? Well, the biggest rectangle here is this, the whole app, meaning the thing you see from edge to edge. The next closest UI elements is the logo in the top with the direct message indicator on the right. I know these things not only because I use Instagram, but also because these are common design patterns in a lot of other applications. You'll have your utility features in the top right and your logo in the center or in the left. And at the bottom, because this is nearest to where your thumbs are when you hold a phone for convenience sake, we have the UI elements for navigation. It's just a fancy term for they'll take you places inside of the app. These patterns that we're circling inside of this UI are actually consistent with the web. Depending on what the web is optimizing for, they just might be in different places. Global navigation might be in the top instead of the bottom, because on a desktop, on a computer, you'll need to see those things at the top. You read text from the top left to the bottom right. But on a phone, you can't reach the top of your screen with your thumb. So we change and adapt these design patterns so that they work for whatever use case that we're trying to do. And it's important to talk about use cases, because this is the container I use for human behavior to decide what I'm going to work on. We're going to get into soon how to write out the text, write out the to-do list item to encapsulate each one of these UI elements in this thing called given when then. Basically, it's a pattern that allows us to take a user flow into craft in some technical terms so that we can build this thing in code and design. Now that we know what the two most prominent pieces of UI are inside of this particular design, we can basically ignore the rest of the design. We're just going to build the app container. The logo, the direct message indicator, and the global navigation in the bottom. These are things that you'll spend a lot of time refining the skills of and building frameworks and reusable code for, because you're going to be doing them a lot. If I were to zoom out, you can see the global navigation actually exists almost every single one of these UI states. The global navigation shows up more than once. In fact, it shows up 7 times in all of these screens and all of these states. It's something that we know that based on that information, based on these designs, we build it once in a pattern, we can reuse it in a modular way and not have to code for it every single time. This is another one of the most fundamental development skills. Don't repeat yourself, call it dry. This idea that we can write something once and then reuse it in many other places. Navigational patterns or design patterns in general give us that kind of translatable visual thing, metaphor, that allow us to follow through with dry.